Hi, my name is Professor Catherine Irwin, and I am in the sociology department. I'm one of 12 faculty members, and I wanted to welcome you to the world of the home life of a sociology professor. But I'm going to do much more than that today. I'm going to walk you through basically what is this thing called sociology and what do we do in sociology. So let me share a screen with you and welcome you to our department and what many things it has to offer. Right. So this is usually what our department looks like. And after COVID, you'll become very familiar with all of the buildings on campus and the departments on campus. So let me take you through a little bit about what sociology is all about and what we do in the sociology department. So what is sociology? It's basically the study of social life. Some people have said to me, wow, sociology is kind of everything, isn't it? And the truth is, sociology is of the analysis of anything social. And what isn't social? So we study social life, social change, social causes and consequences of human behavior. We investigate the structure, organization, nature of groups, small, large, could be two people in interaction, one person and how they perceive of the social world around them. It can be huge, large scale groups. So almost anything is sociology. That's what makes it so hard to grasp as a department and as an idea. So let's move on. What else do we study? We study the family, we study organized crime groups, we study religious organizations, race, gender, and class distinctions and inequalities in society. We study shared beliefs among collectives and all sorts of, like I said, anything from one person, what their perception is of society, to the largest scales of society. And one of them is globalization, the global transfer of information across national boundaries, our shared reality as a globe, which right now, as we know in COVID times, COVID is a global phenomenon. So we study that as well. Okay, so why sociology? Well, I think, and my colleagues believe, that it becomes kind of a big picture way of looking at the world. So just as what isn't sociology, let me ask the same question. What isn't a career that you can go into with a sociology degree? And I think what makes us pretty special is that we prepare students to enter into a world that's changing because you get to understand change and you understand how things change and how they work behind the scenes. Again, from small scale to large scale. So change is just part of nature of the social world. So you guys are prepared for an ever-changing world, and I want you guys to think big. We prepare students to become leaders and innovators for social change and justice. We prepare people to solve problems, big problems and small problems, and what employer doesn't want someone who can do that. I like to think of the next generation, your generation of students, as entrepreneurs in social justice and entrepreneurs and innovators in creating positive change. So we ask questions about, and we look at, in particular, if we talk about our research programs, human migration and in particularly immigration policies. We look at environmental sustainability. We look at globalization, as I mentioned, histories of racism, sexism, and class oppression, global and national health inequalities. We look at mass incarceration as criminologists. Why are we the most incarcerating industrialized nation in the world? And we look at the US and criminal justice system as means of control. So these might be some topics that are interesting to you. And there's career paths in any one of these. So if you're looking at traditional as well as out of the box career paths, you can look at community and social services. You can look at research, nonprofit and for-profit. You can look at policy, education, as well as program design. We prepare you very well for that. Law and justice, if you're interested in that. And as I said, I really do see the next generation as individuals who want to leave the planet a better place than when they came. And on that front, we're really good for young innovators who want to become entrepreneurs in justice and innovation and sustainability and all these things I know that your generation is very interested in. Two of the things that are really important to us as sociologists and preparing sociology majors for the world that they're going to enter is we're very good on research methods. So if there's something you want to know more about, we'll give you the methodological training to know more about it. You'll understand the pros and cons of different approaches to different types of studies. You'll be able to conduct your own study. In fact, you will have to if you become a Soc major. And here's just a few things that we do. In our research methods. We do statistics, which are very powerful, very important in today's society. We also do qualitative work. We look at historical documents and how to analyze those. We look at discourse analyses, and you'll know more about that if you take our classes. You can conduct program evaluations and what we often call community participatory action research, which is going to communities and finding out what kind of research do they need and working with them to design research programs. We're also pretty excellent in theory. We have a solid theoretical training system throughout our many courses in sociology. So we answer the big picture, why? Why are these things happening? Why do people behave the way that they behave? Why do they have the attitudes that they have? Why do we have these institutional structures that do the things that they do? Why do we have the politics that we have? So we're engaged in the answers of why are things the way they are, both large scale and small scale, and that's theory. So I'll refer you, you can look this up on the website. If you want to become a sociology major, there's certain courses you have to take, like in any of the social science departments. There's just a set of courses, look those up online. But what I really want you guys to become accustomed to is the arrangement of classes that we have. We have myriad courses across multiple areas of concentration. So everything, here's our 100 and 300 level courses that were taught in the fall of last year. You can look at all of them there. And that's just our 100, 200, and 300 level courses. Now let's look at our 400 level courses. Oh my goodness. So if you look at this, we cross the span of topics and topics that might be really interesting to you. So during your time at University of Hawaii at Mānoa, we encourage you to check out one of our classes. So a couple of them, race and ethnic relations, juvenile delinquency, which is what I teach. I love it. Drugs and society, social psychology, Chinese society and culture, Korean society and culture, sociology of gender, law, politics and society, sociology of work. It's endless. We have 30 plus courses for undergraduate students each semester on average. So some semesters we have more, some semesters we have fewer, but that's about our range. And we also have, just to give you a little profile of who we are, we have 12 professors. We have over 200 undergraduate majors right now, and we have a little bit over 40 graduate students. And we consider ourselves to be diverse, coming from many different areas of the globe, having many different language skills. Many of us speak more than one language. And we come from different research traditions and different traditions of training. And we, represent different aspects of who's a sociologist. We're different ages, we're different ethnicities and races. We come from different class backgrounds, so we're pretty diverse. I'm going to link this with a video of a few of the faculty in our department. There's 12 of us, and there's 6 faculty members that got together just to chat with you guys about who we are and how we approach our topics. So that will be embedded in this video as well. But and that comes at the end. So I kind of had a chance to talk with them, and they had a chance to kind of present each of their worldviews and their research to you guys. So, but let me skip ahead and past all that, give you some just general information about us. If you want to know more at any time about who we are, here's some really important information for you. Dr. Barbara Joyce is our advisor, who's assigned specifically as an advisor to our Department of Sociology, and she has her PhD in sociology. So even though she works with the College of Social Sciences and their advising team, she understands sociology and she understands our majors. So she does a wonderful job of advising folks. You can also just email us at sociadvisor@hawaii.edu, or you can just email our general department at sociology.hawaii.edu. So let's segue into our 5 major dimensions of sociology and the faculty who teach within them. So one of the things to keep in mind is when I say areas, what I'm really talking about are areas of teaching and research excellence. So let's go ahead and segue over, and you get to meet all of the faculty members area by area. Remember, 5 different areas. Our first area study is race, ethnicity, gender, and class. And we have Professor Nandita Sharma here to talk a little bit about this area with you and her approach to this area in terms of her teaching.
Hi, thanks, Katie. So the area of race, ethnicity, gender, and class is a core part of any sociology department. Here at Mānoa, we have numbers of faculty whose research and teaching touch on this area. The way that I approach this area is to really emphasize the difference between the ideas of race, ethnicity, gender, and the actual practices that bring them into life, which is racism and sexism. So, for example, I would argue that rather than saying that someone's race or ethnicity or gender is causing something to happen to them, I would argue that what is happening is that racism, sexism is operating to shape their life and their life outcomes. And of course, race, ethnicity, gender cannot be really thought about in isolation from relationships of class, from the material relationships of how we actually make our lives, how we live for another day, what are the processes and our differential access to making our lives. Are some people less able to get decent paying jobs, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the approach that I take, is really emphasizing the practices that bring these ideas to life for people, instead of just assuming that the ideas are behind what's happening.
So let's move to our next area. As I said, we have 5 areas of specialty. Health, aging, and medical sociology is this area. And unfortunately, Professor Zhang, Wisakowski, and Professor Lee were busy and they couldn't meet us today to talk a little bit about this area. But medical sociology is a huge field in the area of sociology. It looks at the social organization of health, and we have a special concentration both on mental health as well as aging in a comparative format. So we look at comparative samples across the globe. So Dr. Wei Zhang is the chair of our department. She's fantastic. Students love taking her class. She makes statistics actually understandable for students. So she teaches our stats class, and the students who I've met love taking her stats class, and she makes things doable and easy and tangible. Dr. Krisha Musakowski is another award-winning teaching professor here at the University of Hawaii, and her area is on stress and mental health. She's a quantitative researcher and is great also at quantitative studies. So if you're looking at health measures and you want to do a survey, you want to do some studies of this, or you want to know more about this area, she would be fantastic. And Dr. Yanju Lee is a wonderful addition to our department as well, in that she just published this great book on family care, cross-cultural analysis of family care in Korean families. Fabulous book. It's great. I love hearing about her research. That's our 2 areas. Let's go to our 3rd area now, which is one I know a little bit about: crime, law, and social control. Now for this area, I will turn things over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Ashley Rubin, who'll tell you more about this area and the opportunities within it for students who are taking our classes. So go ahead, Dr. Rubin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Irwin. So the crime, law, and social control area is another one of those classic subfields of sociology. Now, these are topics that you might expect to see in different types of settings. So like crime might be studied in a criminology department, law would obviously be studied in law school. But as sociologists, we look at the larger context and the social explanation for these phenomena. So what does that mean? Well, if you were to go to law school, you learn to think like a lawyer and you learn what we call doctrine. That is the rules about the law and how to interpret those rules. Whereas a sociologist studying the law, we're going to look at things like how specific laws come about, what they're supposed to do, and how that might be different from what they actually do in reality. And we think about what people normally think the law is for and what it actually ends up doing kind of in practice. And then finally, we talk about the consequences of the law generally or specific laws. Likewise, when it comes to studying crime, if you were to go work for the FBI, for example, you might look at why an individual might commit a particular type of crime. Whereas as sociologists, we're going to be interested in bigger questions like why is a particular behavior a crime and why some other behavior that might even be more harmful isn't considered a crime or is regulated in a different system outside of the criminal justice system. In terms of myself, so I'm a scholar of punishment and especially prisons. And when it comes to teaching, one of my favorite classes to teach is called Criminal Justice Organizations, where we look at the parallels between criminal justice organizations like police departments, prisons, and courts, and the parallels between those and things like schools, hospitals, and Fortune 500 companies, and how the same sorts of pressures and kind of social influences shape the behavior of these two very different sets of organizations. So I think that's all I'll say about me. So I'll turn it back over to Dr. Irwin. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. What you really get when you look at these three criminologists, and all of us are in this area that's broadly called criminology, is you get a dynamic cross-section of the different ways that people do criminology, both as teachers and researchers. So you'll see here, first we've got Dr. David Johnson. He is also a law and society scholar and also looking at punishment, but he comes at the question of punishment from a cross-cultural perspective, and he does a comparative perspective, looking particularly at Asia and Japan in particular. Now, I'm a criminologist that studies what we call critical criminology. I'm a feminist criminologist, so I'm well-versed in feminist theory and gender studies, and I apply that to the knowledge that I have about criminology and criminology theory. So I was trained in an area of criminology theory. It's called crime causation, or some people call it the etiology of crime, but it basically is theories about why are people criminal? Why do they break laws? So some of my favorite classes to teach are large criminology classes. I really like to get people excited about the topic of criminology, crime, social control, and multiple inequalities. So I've taken my feminist theory knowledge and all of the research I've done on gender studies, and now I'm applying it intersectionally. So I'm looking at multiple inequalities because I feel like, as Professor Nandita Sharma mentioned, these things don't act alone. They're not by themselves, that they're interconnected. So we're talking about gender inequalities. We often talk about race inequalities. We often talk about class inequalities. And it's not an accident that when we look at mass incarceration in America and we think about the racial disproportionality of incarceration, 1 in 3 African-American males born today, if everything stays the same, will end up in the criminal justice system, right? It's also poverty. We also have to look at poverty as one of those dimensions. So we can't look at these things alone, that they're interconnected. That we are calling nationalism, globalization, and sustainability. Before turning it over to my esteemed colleagues, let's give you a chance to kind of absorb some of the information on the slide. We have with us, luckily today, who is on sabbatical right now in Japan, but she's visiting us for this afternoon, is Professor Aya Kimura, who will talk a little bit about this area and her teaching. Thank you, Aya.
Thank you, Katie. So I do research on sustainability issues, particularly in agriculture, food, technology, and science. I love thinking sociologically about food because it provides an intriguing entry point to ask many interesting questions. For example, how can we reduce social and environmental costs of modern food? What are the impacts of the industrialization and globalization of food? The courses I teach include women and health, sociology of sustainability, food and body, and research methods. So we learn in these courses sociological issues in nutrition, nutrition science, sustainability, food security, and many more. But I want to emphasize that in these courses, students learn lifelong skills that cannot be easily substituted, for example, by artificial intelligence or big data. So today, data on anything is abundant. you're probably feeling that your actions are turned into data points anywhere, anytime during the day. The problem that companies and the government agencies now have is not the lack of data oftentimes, but the analytic frameworks and good questions to sort of understand the data, right? So in my classes, students learn how to ask good questions. For instance, you see data on energy, say the cost of electricity, and it may show that nuclear is cheaper than renewables like wind and solar. But before you jump on to say, and we should go with nuclear, we should ask other kinds of questions, right? What kind of cost is included? And what kind of cost is excluded? And who's bearing the cost? Okay, so that's one thing I emphasize in my teaching. Another important skill that I try to teach in my class is to critically examine the ideas that are taken for granted. And this is, I think, a very important skill in the age of AI. AI can only operate in the framework of a continuation of the present. So it understands the patterns in the present, and the future is projected based on the present. But human history has had moments of paradigm shifts, disruption to the status quo, and innovations that are out of box. So in college, you need to learn how to unpack the taken for granted ideas so that you can be creative and innovative. But how do we do it? So in my classes, we learn that the standards and the norm and the assumptions, they tend to be rooted in the experiences of the privileged, right? People with the socioeconomic power. So in order to loosen the grip of the norm, the assumptions, my classes explore issues from the vantage points of the subaltern, the marginalized, the oppressed. For instance, we often hear it's great to have genetically engineered food to combat world hunger, to combat vitamin deficiency in the developing world. GMOs help solve the world hunger. But that's the perspective of the promoters of the new technology, the corporations, the experts. But we might ask, what are the perspectives of the poor? Peasants, the farmers in developing countries may say that it's because we have lost access to the land that we can no longer produce vitamin-rich vegetables, right? So this really helps question the mainstream ideas and paradigms and explore different paradigms of world hunger. So we might have normalized the new technologies that, then they would solve the world hunger, but looking at the issues from different vantage points, political mobilization of peasants may emerge as a solution. So we are facing great environmental challenges from climate change to the loss of biodiversity. Many of these challenges are rooted in social institutions, how we organize our society. And many solutions are coming from social movements, right? So these are the topics that sociologists have great expertise on. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Professor Kimura. Yeah, and Kimura's books are absolutely wonderful. I highly recommend that you guys check out a copy or buy a copy and converse with her about all of her really exceptional research. So let's now move to Professor Manfred Steger, who's also in this area and is a dynamic professor in the classroom. And I've heard many students rave about him as well. So thank you, Professor Steger.
Aloha, students. I'm passionate about globalization research and globalization teaching, so feel free to call me Mr. Globalization. What would I like to do in terms of my teaching approach? I would like to invite you to do and become two things. One is critical thinkers, and the other one is global citizens. So first of all, what is globalization? Globalization really is about the expansion of social relations and consciousness across world time and world space. So in other words, things are shrinking and things are getting faster. And what are the social implications of this? What are the political implications, the cultural implications? Those are the kinds of things that we are dealing with critically in my classes. A critical thinker is someone who can solve problems, real problems. That's where theory and thinking and practice interlink. Somebody who can be balanced, who can see different sides of things, but also somebody who can make moral judgments, who thinks ethically, who has a desire, as I do, to make the world a better place. And what is a global citizen, right? The other thing that I would like you to consider. A global citizen is a person who cultivates thinking beyond national borders. And this is where nationalism comes in this field, right? A global citizen is somebody who has a sense of global responsibility across nation states, somebody who is committed to strengthening democracy, empowerment, participation, and somebody who engages. So in other words, engagement is really one of the elements that I would like you to consider. I teach a variety of classes, but perhaps my most favorite class is Sociology 413, which is Economy and Society, where we're looking at capitalism all the way from the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution to the age of globalization. Here you have it again, globalization. So I hope that you'll be interested in this field and that I will see you in my classes. Mahalo.
So let's get to our last but not our least area of excellence. Asia, Pacific, Hawaii in regional and global contexts. Give you guys a second to review all the information in this slide. And then we have here with us Dr. Lelin, who can tell a little bit more about this area and his approach.
Aloha, students. Welcome. I think UH Manoa is an excellent place, the special place to study Asia Pacific, not only because we're in the right place, the right location, in the middle of Asia Pacific, but also because we have world-leading experts who specializes in Pacific, in Japan, Korea, and China. So we're able to do comparative and transnational studies of these Asia Pacific communities. So we can go beyond any single individual nation state. Another reason that makes us special is because we take social dynamic and social process seriously. We're in the middle of a rapid social change. So we want to really dive deep into the specific processes of those Asia Pacific communities. And also you'll be able to find that our department is where we publish the social process of Hawaii, the right place to study Hawaii and Asia Pacific. With regard to my own research, I am an organizational and economic sociologist, and I'm mostly interested in understanding how and why education, healthcare, and other formerly public goods privatized, marketized in China, in US, and around the world. I also encourage our students to participate in research and to bring in our own genuine concern about the society. So for me, for example, I grew up in a state-owned Chinese hospital camps where my parents and other physicians lived in employer-provided housing. So I really witnessed how medical services transformed from socialist public goods into highly marketized arrangements. So I also encourage students to bring their own concerns for the society into classrooms. And in terms of teaching, I teach a variety of classes, but my favorite is Soc 356, Chinese Society and Culture. This is the right time to study China and its relation with the US, right? We have two superpowers, and some people say, hey, these two superpowers may one day be destined to war. So in this class, we'll study the politics, economy, and culture of China. So we're able to understand the dynamics of China and its relationship with the world, and also to identify some of the bias in our mass media, in our everyday interaction. And in this class, I also take active learning seriously.
Hi, so those were 6 of our faculty members. Welcome to the University of Hawaii Department of Sociology. I'll leave you with this last slide, and thank you so much for coming by and visiting us online. We can't wait to meet you in person. Take care. Aloha.